Truth Unveiled here, and today I wanted to share this with you because it's very important that you know about it. It has to do with mandatory passports that could come to the US as early as 2018, and we're going to be talking more about that along with the recent changes that are going forth. And I'm here at Fox that says, here's why travelers from 22 states could face conflict with domestic flights in 2018. Now, the article itself says the deadline is approaching for nearly 24 states that have yet to update state IDs in compliance with the Real ID Act, which was passed in 2005. And we're going to be taking a look at that act later on in the video to come. As a result, residents in those states may have to present a valid U.S. passport or other identification instead of previously used driver's licenses or IDs to travel within the U.S. and beyond. And note how this is domestic travel, folks. We're just talking within the United States from state to state. It says right here, travelers who live in the following states could be affected, and ones in regions such as Alaska, California, Idaho, Illinois, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, and Washington. It also says here residents of Guam, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, the Northern Mariana Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands could also be affected, as well as those from Virginia. And we're going to be going over the map from the TSA in just a moment to come also. It says here the Real ID Act, which places standards for the issuance of sources of ID, establish minimum security standards for license issuance and production, and prohibits federal agencies from accepting for certain purposes driver's licenses and ID cards from states not meeting the Act's minimum standards, according to your favorite, the DHS. The Act came after 9/11 as an effort to ensure safer travel within the U.S. You see how this is problem, reaction, solution, these acts that they're passing and these draconian laws after 9/11, and we know the real truth about that: problem, reaction, solution all over again, which of course leads to stricter laws and stricter gun control laws, as we're seeing. And I know I've joked about this before, but it's really happening, folks. Like I even said, soon enough you're going to need a passport just to go across the street. Soon enough, you're going to need identification just to go across the street, just to go to your neighbor's house or even a friend's house. That's where it's going. Do you see how it's slowly but surely? But then it says here, according to consumer expert Clark Howard, despite the fact that Congress passed the act more than 10 years ago, enforcement to the new regulations was not pushed until 2013. 26 states have provided residents with federally compliant driver's licenses or IDs, and for those that have not, beginning as of 1/22/2018, other forms of identification that will be accepted by the TSA or Transportation Security Administration at airports for travelers living in the above listed states will be a permanent resident card or green card or military ID. Other forms of acceptable ID are listed on the official TSA website, which we'll also be going over. So it says those who visit airports starting as of 1/22/2018 without acceptable ID will not be allowed through airport security. Now here is an article from Forbes. So in a nutshell, what all of this means is that all of the states that we just listed, these states do not meet federal regulations when it comes to licenses and when it comes to identification purposes, according to the Real ID Act that was passed in 2005, which requires states to confirm legal residency to issue standard driver licenses and IDs. But some licenses, according to your government, are not compliant, and the ones that we just listed from the states are not. And so what your government has decided to do is give these states an extension period all the way up until the winter time of 2018 for their state IDs to match and to adhere to the guidelines that are outlined in the Real ID Act of 2005, and probably sneak other spying techniques into their ID systems. And if the states still do not comply to the Real ID Act by this time, a state ID is no longer issued or needed when it comes to airport travel, and then other identification and methods of ID will have to be used. As you can see right here, all non-compliant states are currently under review for possible extension, with the added exception of Virginia, whose extension is now valid until October 10th of 2018. And like we said, folks, this isn't just for any type of flight internationally. This is also talking about domestic flights too. So if your state is currently non-compliant and if they do not meet the standards by the winter time of 2018, by the period that they're supposed to, well then guess what? You're going to need a passport just to travel from state by state, or any type of identification that is accepted by the TSA. Now, the Washington Post also talks more about how to know if your license is compliant or not. It says here, in most states, a gold or black star in the top part of the card means it is compliant with federal guidelines and does in fact match the same and is worth the same as much as a passport when it comes to identification, federally speaking. But then it says right here, a good way to know your card is not compliant if it says, quote, not for federal identification. Others without this marking could also be non-compliant. And right here, now I'm at the DHS website that also talks more about the Real ID, and we'll also be talking more about the frequently asked questions later on in the video to come as we review this. And of course, this comes under the category preventing terrorism, because that's why they're really doing all this, isn't it? But it says right here, the Real ID Act establishes minimum security standards for license issuance and production and prohibits federal agencies from accepting for certain purposes driver's licenses and ID cards from states that don't meet the Act's minimum standards according to them. And again, it sounds like what? More problem reaction solution, more spying techniques. That's what this is in a nutshell. The purposes covered by the Act are accessing federal facilities, entering nuclear power plants, and boarding federally regulated commercial aircraft, because they need to spy and track on your every move, where you're going, how you're doing so, and when you're going there. Now, this is the current status of states and territories, and this just gives a brief overview of the map, and the ones listed in the yellow and the blue are the ones that we just went over in the Fox article if you're also following along. But note how it says here, DHS is currently reviewing extension requests from states with extensions that expired as of October 10, 2017. So the states that are listed in yellow and blue, they actually had expired 9 days ago. DHS will update this page as these reviews are completed and new extensions are granted. In the meantime, there will be no change in enforcement status for these states. So what that means is that everyone in the United States up until 1/22/2018, this date right here, everyone can continue to use their state issued ID cards for the purposes of flight and domestic aircraft. States will have a period up until this date, though, meaning that the federal agencies, including TSA, will continue to accept driver's license and ID cards issued by these states in accordance with each agency's policies. Now, as you can see right here, the states that are outlined in yellow have an extension period that extend all the way up until this date, until they have to change or regulate their IDs so that it can match the IDs that is outlined and highlighted in compliance with the Real ID Act of 2005, and we just listed those states. The states in blue that we also listed, like Illinois, Michigan, Missouri, Louisiana, New York, Rhode Island, and the territories, they're currently under review, while the green states are compliant, and the states where IDs were issued in these particular states can continue to be used for domestic flights even after this state listed right here. But as for the other ones, if these other states do not comply, that's highlighted in the yellow and the blue that you see right here, well, soon enough, they're going to have to use something else. Another form or method of identification is going to have to be used even for domestically traveled aircraft traveling from state to state besides a state ID, which more than likely will have to be a passport. Do you see where this is going? Who knew you needed a book to travel state by state? Who knew you even needed a book to even get on a plane? Why do you even need such things, and why do you even need to pay the toll roads just for driving? Do you see that you're not free? It's all a matrix. It's time to come out of this matrix and really wake up to the beast system that's already being implemented right in front of our faces, slowly but surely. Because I'm even here at the DHS website once again at their frequently asked questions that talks more about the Real ID Act, which I'll be sure to link in the description box below. And this says right here, why is DHS implementing air travel in stages? It says, as of 2016, the Security of Homeland Security announced the following timetable for the implementation of the Real ID Act for air travel. And mind you, this act was passed in 2005 after 9/11, even though we know the truth about 9/11 and how it wasn't because of no darn terrorism that your government is trying to feed us with propaganda. But according to this, it said as of the summer of 2016, TSA will begin to issue web-based advisories and notifications to the traveling public in coordination with airlines and airport stakeholders. And then the winter of 2016, TSA will expand outreach at its airport checkpoints through signage, handouts, and other methods. See, checkpoints, that's what they're doing. And then as of the winter of 2018, passengers with the driver's license issued by a state that is still not complying with the Real ID Act, so the states that are listed right here in the yellow and the blue, as we see right here, and you could take a look at this on your own time, or has not been granted an extension, will need to show an alternative form of acceptable identification for domestic air travel to board their flight. Passengers with driver's license issued by a state that is compliant with a Real ID or a state that has been issued an extension will still be able to use their driver's licenses or ID cards, so the states that are listed in green right here, as you can see. And then as of October 1st, 2020, every air traveler will need some type of Real ID compliant license or another acceptable form of ID just for domestic air travel alone. But the better question is, folks, how long will it be until this is required for toll roads, until it's required for toll booths, until it's required for other things? These are some questions we really need to be asking ourselves, especially at such a time as this. But right now I'm here at the TSA's website that talks more about Real ID in air travel, and it's a fact sheet that's 2 pages long. And it says here, passed by Congress in 2005, the Real ID Act established minimum security standards for state-issued driver's licenses and ID cards and prohibits federal agencies like TSA from accepting licenses and ID cards for official purposes from states that do not meet these standards. And just a quick brief overview, this is things that we've already talked about, the dates beginning as of winter 2018 and October 1st, 2020. If your state is compliant with this, you can continue to use your state-issued driver's license or ID to fly in the U.S. until October 1st, 2020, because beginning at that point, you may only use a Real ID compliant driver's license or ID or another acceptable form of ID. And who knows what other unnecessary forms of identification that they're already up to and are already enforcing and making behind closed doors, even as we speak. Because we know it's about what? More spying on you. That's all this is about with Fallen One technology. But then it goes on to say here, if your state is not compliant, beginning in the winter of 2018, you may continue to use your state-issued driver's license or ID for domestic air travel only if your state has been granted an extension to the compliance deadline by DHS. However, if your state has not been granted that extension, you may not use your state-issued driver's license or ID for domestic air travel. And as of 2020, October 1st, you may not use your state-issued driver's license or ID for domestic air travel. Now I'm actually at the TSA website once again. Here are the forms of identification that are commonly accepted in order to travel according to your TSA and all your other alphabet soups. Now currently, as of right now, they still have driver's license or other state photo ID cards that are issued by Department of Motor Vehicles on here, or the equivalent thereof. They're still listed: a passport, passport card, DHS trusted traveler cards, U.S. military ID, permanent resident cards, and the list goes on. So for example, if certain states are still not compliant, or if you're in one of those states where state IDs and driver's licenses are no longer required and can no longer be accepted by the TSA in order for air travel, then you'll have to use one of these other documents right here and identification purposes in order to travel. So in case you don't have a passport or a passport card, well, if you have a U.S. military ID, then you could use that. If you have a DHS designated enhanced driver's license, you could use that. If you have a tribal issue photo ID, you can use that, and so on. But if you don't have any of these things, then it looks like a passport would be the next option. Now, this really mostly applies for air travel. It does not apply when it comes to entering federal facilities that do not require a person to present ID. It does not apply to voting or registering to vote. It does not apply when it comes to receiving or applying for federal benefits. It does not apply for being licensed by a state to drive or accessing health or life-preserving services, including hospitals and health clinics, law enforcement, or constitutionally protected activities, along with participating in law enforcement proceedings or investigations. And I'm here discussing more about this act that was passed in 2005. And of course, the same thing over and over that they're going to continuously tell us is, oh, they're doing it in the name of terrorism. Oh, they're doing it in the name to fight off terrorists that could come into America. Oh, they're doing it in the name to keep America safe from terrorists. No, they are not, because we know the real terrorists are the ones who are implementing these laws to begin with. But it says right here that it implements the following. Title II of the Act establishes new federal standards for state-issued driver's license and non-driver ID cards, changing visa limits for temporary workers, nurses, and Australian citizens, funding some reports and pilot projects related to border security, introducing rules covering delivery bonds similar to bail but for aliens who have been released pending hearings, updating and tightening the laws on application for asylum and deportation of aliens for so-called terrorism, so this has to do with immigration, and waiving laws that interfere with construction of physical barriers at the borders, along with standards for state driver's license and ID documents. Because when we look at the bigger picture, we start to see what is really going on and the purpose behind this. Because even if you look at the controversy and opposition behind this, what it seems like they're trying to do is do what? Potentially start a national ID card controversy. And we know your United Nations, not only are they working with Agenda 21 of depopulation and Agenda 2030, but they're also trying to do what? Establish worldwide IDs for everyone to be able to track everyone worldwide. That's what they're trying to do. It says here there is disagreement about whether the Real ID Act institutes a quote national ID card system. The new law only places forth national standards but leaves the issuance of cards and the maintenance of databases in state hands. Therefore, the DHS, of course, they're going to claim it's not a national ID system, but that's what they're really trying to go for. And of course, they also talk about the constitutionality, but we already know they already ripped the Constitution to shreds the moment they signed it. Now, this is the act right here, and what they also outline in the act is emergency supplemental appropriations and funds for those who were affected by hurricanes such as Hurricane Katrina and tsunami disaster relief. Now, the act itself is 93 pages long. I'll be sure to link this in the description box below. Now, it's just very interesting and suspicious indeed how they passed this shortly after 9/11, and that's their key reason that they claim to be passing it. Like we said, problem, reaction, solution. They're turning the problem internally, and of course, this is just part of the beginning of the beast system, the beast technology that's already in place, and it's slowly but surely. It's not some big event that everybody's looking forward to. It's actually much slower than that, and it's a plan to do what? Turn America into a police state, get everyone with these IDs and have everyone under these IDs so that the government can not only track you and track your every move, but like I also talked about in previous videos, which is why they have the fusion centers with the DHS and all those other ones, to also do what? Track dissidents. And eventually, we know it's not going to stop here, because what they might eventually end up doing is make everyone receive newly federally issued IDs, complete with spying and facial recognition technology and programming. I mean, just take a look at Walmart and you'll see that Walmart, they already have facial recognition programming into their stores already, even as we speak, along with street lights that have facial recognition too and can recognize your face wherever you go. that are working hand in hand with the Department of Homeland Security for spying to turn America into a police state so that when martial law is declared in America and when stuff starts hitting the fan, whenever that is, they already have the systems and the technology and everything ready to go for citizens, or should I say dissidents of America. Please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha, because as you see, it's slowly but surely. They're not going to put everything in front of your face, but they're building it just like what? The Tower of Babel. But now we see what they're really doing, and we see with both our eyes open what's really going on. This is Truth Unveiled here, keeping you updated and saying as always, Shalom.